Hi, my name is Megan Hance, and I chose to do my presentation on the dress code in schools. First of all, this topic goes hand in hand with the First Amendment right of freedom of expression. Students have the right to freedom of speech even in public schools. In the past, it had been thought that since it's a public school district, the school can ban whatever they'd like, but this is untrue under this right. School officials can restrict the freedom if it is or could disrupt or impede the learning process or any instruction time throughout the day. Schools might also ban clothing, buttons, or other messages if it portrays something vulgar, obscene, inappropriate, or mocks another race, religion, or gender. The Supreme Court will not address this issue. They say that the student dress is a form of free expression and is not considered as significant as other forms of expressions. So they kind of aren't making laws on it. It's like up to the schools. A landmark case that I had researched was the Tinker case. In 1969, 3 students wore black armbands to school to protest the government's policy in Vietnam. They were unhappy about what was happening, so instead of holding a loud protest or anything at school, they just wore black armbands on their sleeves. These students were suspended from school without the school having to prove that the armbands for their protests provided a disruption to the instruction of learning and what happened that day at school. The students said that they weren't causing a disruption or anything. They just wanted to silently be protesting what had happened. And the school did not agree with that. More about that case, the outcomes. The court sided with the students, saying that their peaceful protest did not disrupt the learning environment and that the staff need to respect the students' civil rights as well. The court also stated that for the students' civil rights to be restricted, the school has to provide an explanation of how the learning process had been disrupted that day, or how it could be disrupted in the future. They need to provide a detailed explanation of what had happened and why it needed to be restricted. Another landmark case that I had looked into was the Melton v. Young case. This case was about in 1972, a student in Tennessee wore a shirt with a Confederate flag on it after that symbol had previously been banned from the school. The student that wore the flag was suspended. The student took his suspension to court because he said that the rule was vague in the way it was printed, and that the rule only stated that it banned provocative symbols on clothing. It didn't specifically say the Confederate flag, so he said that the rule was too vague. The court found that the school did have a reason to believe that the jacket worn by the student would be disruptive to the school and the learning environment. The case talked about in the previous year, the school had had a lot of trouble with the Confederate flag and some racial issues between different people at the school, so they did not believe that this would turn out well, so they were trying to stop it before, something happened this year. The judge ruled in favor of the school and said that, but said they felt torn in situations like this to protect the students' freedom of speech, but they also need to think about the learning environment and how students can learn at school if the process would be disruptive. Things like that. My next slide talks about laws on dress code in school. There actually are no laws on the dress code. There's restrictions and guidelines that states and districts enforce in their own buildings, but the court system just makes sure that you're not violating the student's right to expression from the First Amendment. What are the guidelines and restrictions? They said in our book that safety of students is one of the guidelines and restrictions that they look for and put in place. They, like, for example, wearing long hair or no jewelry in a science lab. That's a restriction that the school can put in place because it is protecting the safety of its students. Health of the students, for example, keeping your hair clean, not, having pesticides or lice and stuff in students' hair, and being able to do something about that. Third, if the dress does not meet the standards of the community, for example, wearing clothes that call undue attention to the student, they can put restrictions on that. And lastly, the fourth guideline was if it presents disruption to the orderly administration of the school or the learning environment. Example, vulgar words on a t-shirt worn on a student's clothing, like the Confederate flag example. That was disruptive to the learning environment, so they were able to put a restriction on that. I did some research on the most common dress code restrictions today in our country. No hats was a huge one. Also, no vulgar, inappropriate language printed on clothing or any article of clothing. So, like the Confederate flag example again, they're allowed to put those restrictions because it's interrupting the school day. Another big one was length of clothing. A lot of schools' websites had the fingertip rule for shorts, skirts, dresses on girls or boys. No crop tops or tank tops with like little spaghetti straps, no stomach showing. Another big one for boys was the underwear showing out of the backside of their pants. That's another big restriction schools had. Another one, identifying gang affiliations, including the names, colors, accessories, jewelry. Nothing that you wear should be able to be associated with a gang. Sleepwear, including wearing pajamas or slippers to school, was a restriction in most places. Finally, leggings and yoga pants because of how tight-fitting they were. And this restriction went into place my senior year of high school at my school when yoga pants and leggings were kind of becoming a big thing. They put that restriction on there because of how tight-fitting the clothes are. It's uncomfortable for some people. So those were the most common dress code restrictions that I had found on different school websites and the different schools that I had worked in. And then I put in a picture of explaining each of these. So the top picture is no hats. Right besides that, or under that, is a vulgar symbol on a shirt that had been worn at a school. The top one is the shorts and the crop tops and off the shoulder. All of those things were inappropriate in schools. Right next to that is the gang affiliations, and then under that the underwear picture with the boys. No sleepwear, and then next to that is the yoga or leggings, and then the crop tops again. I also found while I was researching the most common dress code restrictions in different websites on schools, I found these two little matrices on their websites as well, and it gave acceptable and non-acceptable dress codes or things to wear on the top one. So I liked that they gave students an example of the acceptable things, acceptable shirts and hairstyles. Next to it is not acceptable, no bandanas, hats, baseball hats. Under it, acceptable shirts, and next to it, not acceptable, the tank tops, the crop tops, no tank tops on boys, no spaghetti straps. Under it is the pants example. Acceptable is longer shorts, longer skirts and pants. Not acceptable, you can see the shorts are above the girls' fingertips. No pant or underwear sticking out of the boys' pants, and then the last one is leggings that are tight-fitted. At the bottom one just gives an example of a bunch of things that girls aren't allowed to wear to school. So I like that they gave them a visual of what is acceptable and what is not. So there's like a clear line and guideline of what you should be doing and what you should not be doing, instead of just don't do this, you know, giving them the acceptable things as well. So that is what I had found on the dress code.